wasn't supposed to notice him again. That was the first lie I told myself the morning I saw him on the other side of the balcony rail, sunlight cutting across his face like it had chosen him. The man, next door had moved in months ago. I knew only fragments. 25, freelance designer, early riser, always wearing that same black shirt with the top button undone. Every morning when I left for work, I'd catch a glimpse of him watering his plants. The hem of his sleeve rolled just enough to reveal forearms dusted with light. He'd nod, sometimes smile, sometimes say, "Morning," and I'd pretend not to feel anything at all. After my divorce last year, silence had become a kind of armor. I filled my days with motion, consulting calls, gallery meetings, fitness classes I didn't enjoy, anything to keep my mind from wandering toward what had cracked inside me. I was the kind of woman who handled everything, who never flinched. My colleagues still introduced me as the one who always knows what she wants. They didn't know I hadn't been sure of a single thing since the papers were signed. That morning, I was rearranging my living room, again, when I heard his voice through the open window. "You rearrange your furniture more than anyone I know," he called, his tone light, teasing. I froze, one hand on a framed print of abstract sunlight I'd been about to hang. "That's because I like change," I said, forcing a smile that he couldn't see. "Or because you're restless," he said. The word struck me harder than I wanted to. Admit, restless. The kind of word that shouldn't sting unless it's true. When I turned toward the balcony, he was leaning casually against the rail, phone in one hand, the other resting on the warm steel. His shirt caught the sunlight, open at the collar, the fabric moving softly in the breeze. He looked so sure of himself, but not arrogant, just grounded. "You study people a lot for someone who barely knows them," I said, trying to sound amused. "I notice what most people try to hide," he replied, eyes steady on mine. "You look like you're trying to stay busy enough not to feel something." He wasn't wrong, and the fact that he wasn't wrong unsettled me. I stepped closer to the light, resting my coffee cup on the edge of the balcony. "You must have a lot of time on your hands to analyze your neighbors," he grinned. "Not really. I just notice you." The words hung in the air like static. For a long second, neither of us spoke. The sounds of the city drifted upward. Distant horns, a vendor shouting, the soft hum of life moving on without hesitation. But between us, everything slowed. I turned away first, pretending to check my phone, my pulse too loud in my ears. "You're too young to sound that sure of yourself," I said. "I'm old enough to know what I see," he answered. The way he said it, quiet, certain, made my breath catch. For years, men my age had talked in circles, negotiations disguised as affection. But this was different. His certainty wasn't dominance. It was presence. Over the next week, he became a rhythm in my days. Morning coffee glances, midday coincidences in the hallway. Once, at the cafe downstairs, he held the door open for me and said, "You're not wearing your armor today." I asked him what he meant. He just smiled and said, "You'll figure it out." I tried to dismiss him as an indulgence, a distraction. But every time I saw him, sunlight in his hair, shirt unbuttoned just enough to look like he belonged in a painting, I felt the air tighten between us. He didn't flirt. He didn't need to. His calm was a provocation all its own. One afternoon, I found him sketching on the shared terrace. The city glittered below, white and gold, heat rising off glass buildings. "What are you drawing?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. "Light," he said, not looking up. "Light doesn't hold still long enough to be drawn." He looked at me then. "Neither do you." My throat went dry. I wanted to laugh it off, but instead I sat down opposite him. The tiles beneath us were warm from the sun. A faint scent of jasmine from the railing planters mixed with the smell of his cologne. Clean, restrained, with something like cedar underneath. He handed me his pencil. "Your turn. For what?" "To draw what you see." I hesitated, then traced the outline of the sky, a single curved line across the page. "That's what I see," I said. He smiled. "That's what you want to see." There it was again, his unnerving clarity. It should have irritated me, but instead it felt intimate, like he'd touched something under my skin without permission. When I got up to leave, he said almost carelessly, "You know, you don't look like someone who stopped believing in love." The remark hit too close. "What makes you think I haven't?" "Because you still notice light." I walked away, pretending his words didn't matter, but they followed me inside. They replayed while I worked, while I showered, while I stood before my mirror later that evening, hair damp, sunlight slanting across my reflection. You still notice light. The next morning I saw him again, this time in the elevator. He smelled faintly of citrus and warm air. His shirt, again black, again open at the collar, caught my eye before I could stop myself. "You always look like you're about to escape somewhere," he said softly. "Maybe I am." He leaned against the wall beside me, close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating off him. The elevator hummed, the floor numbers sliding past too slowly. "What are you running from?" he asked. "From remembering what it feels like to be seen," I said before I could stop the words. He didn't laugh. He didn't fill the silence. He just looked at me, steady, understanding, unflinching. When the doors opened, I stepped out first, heart racing. He followed, his voice low, almost amused. "I wasn't asking to chase you," he said. "I was asking if you'd let someone walk beside you." The sunlight outside was sharp, dazzling. I turned, ready to dismiss him again, to rebuild the distance I'd let collapse. But his expression disarmed me. Open, sincere, too honest for someone his age. "I don't let people in that easily," I said. "I didn't ask for easy," he replied. That afternoon, I found a small sketch slipped under my door. It wasn't of me, but of the sunlight across my balcony rail. The caption at the bottom read, "Still believing." For a moment, I just stood there, the city humming outside, the paper trembling slightly in my hand. My chest felt tight, unfamiliar, alive. I knew I should end this before it began, before curiosity turned into consequence. But as I placed the sketch on my desk, the light spilling across it like a quiet confession, I realized something had already shifted. Whatever line existed between us, it had been crossed the moment he said my restlessness out loud. And now, neither of us could pretend it hadn't happened. The sketch stayed on my desk for days. I told myself I hadn't moved it because I'd been too busy, but every morning my eyes went to it before my coffee cup did. It was just pencil and paper, and yet, somehow it carried heat, like he'd drawn the memory of sunlight itself. He started appearing everywhere after that. Not in a deliberate way, more like we shared the same rhythm now. The same hours, the same corners of the day. Once, I caught him at the cafe below our building, sitting by the window, sketchbook open, light pooling around him. He noticed me instantly and lifted his cup in a half salute. I told myself I wouldn't go over. I went anyway. "You're not working today?" I asked, setting down my phone. "I am," he said, closing his sketchbook. "Just not the kind of work that needs Wi-Fi." The barista slid my cappuccino across the counter, the foam perfect, dusted with cocoa. Outside, sunlight bounced off passing cars, fractured across the glass, painting faint gold patterns over our table. "You've been quiet lately," he said. "I've been trying to be sensible," I replied. He smiled. "How's that going?" "Poorly," I admitted. Something in his eyes softened, then darkened slightly, like he understood the cost of that honesty. He leaned back, his black shirt open at the collar, sleeves rolled, a hint of skin catching the light. "You know," he said, "most people think love is something that happens to you. I think it's something you decide to let happen." "That sounds like something people say before they get hurt," I said. "Or before they finally stop running," he countered. The air between us felt suddenly charged, not loud, not heavy, just alive. His hand brushed mine as he reached for the sugar. It wasn't intentional, but it wasn't entirely accidental either. My fingers froze. He didn't move his away. For a second, the cafe noise dimmed. The city fell quiet, and all I could hear was the sound of his breath, steady and close. I pulled my hand back first. "You should be careful," I said quietly. "People will misunderstand." "Maybe it's time they do," he said. A week later, we ended up in the same elevator again. It was late morning, sunlight slicing through the glass shaft as the city glowed below. He was holding 2 coffees. Without asking, he handed me one. "Still rearranging your furniture?" he teased. "Still pretending not to?" I replied. He grinned. "You noticed." "I noticed more than I should," I admitted. The elevator doors opened to the rooftop terrace, a place I rarely visited, though I'd lived here for years. He stepped out and tilted his head toward the horizon. "You ever come up here?" "Never had a reason to," I said. "Maybe now you do." I followed him into the light. The city stretched endlessly, towers and terraces gleaming, windows flashing white under the sun. The air smelled faintly of heat and lemon trees from the planters. I took a sip of coffee, letting the warmth steady me. He sat on the low wall, elbows resting on his knees. "You always look like you're holding your breath," he said. "I'm holding my life together," I corrected. He studied me for a moment. "Is that the same thing?" I didn't answer. Instead, I looked out over the skyline, the kind of silence that feels almost fragile settling between us. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter. My mother used to say, "If you stare at the sun too long, you'll go blind." But maybe that's the point. I turned to him. "What does that even mean?" "It means maybe we're not supposed to keep our distance from what makes us feel alive." He said it simply, without trying to impress me. And yet it landed like a confession. Something inside me stirred. Something I'd buried long before the divorce. I didn't move closer. But I didn't step away either. The next day at the gallery, everything felt off balance. I was presenting a new installation. Sunlight through glass prisms, scattering color across the walls. And every flash of gold reminded me of him. During the reception, I saw him at the far end of the room. He shouldn't have been there, but he was, standing confidently among the guests, shirt open at the collar, eyes locked on mine. "How did you even get in?" I whispered when I reached him. I asked nicely. He said, his tone teasing but his gaze steady. "People will talk," I hissed. "Then let them talk about something real for once," he said. Before I could reply, my assistant appeared beside me, asking about a client. I turned to answer, but the weight of his presence stayed at my back, warm, constant. When I glanced again, he was already gone. The rest of the evening blurred. Applause, polite smiles, empty compliments, until the crowd thinned and the sunlight dimmed through the high windows. That's when I saw it, another small sketch on the table beside the display catalogs. My balcony, my chair, and a single line beneath it. "You always look toward the light." I didn't realize I was smiling until one of the guests asked if I was all right. I just nodded, speechless. The following Sunday, he knocked on my door. No pretext, no excuse, just the casual certainty of someone who'd already decided to be there. "I made lunch," he said, holding up a takeout bag. "You can call it neighborly concern if it helps." The smell hit me first. Basil, sun-warmed tomatoes, and something that reminded me of home. I hesitated for only a second before stepping aside. We ate on the balcony, the city shimmering below, sunlight tracing the edges of our plates. He asked about my work. I asked about his sketches. Every question led somewhere deeper. Childhood memories, unspoken fears, fragments of dreams. At one point, he said quietly, "You talk like someone who's been disappointed by people who promised permanence." "I don't believe in permanence anymore," I said. "Then believe in moments," he whispered. He reached across the small table and brushed a crumb from the corner of my mouth. The gesture was so gentle, so uncalculated that I forgot to breathe. His fingers lingered a second too long. I felt my pulse in my throat, in the air between us. "Don't," I said softly, but there was no conviction in it. He drew his hand back, eyes searching mine. "You keep saying that word like you're trying to protect me." "Maybe I'm protecting myself." "From what?" "From wanting to stay." He didn't answer. He just looked at me, the sunlight catching in his eyes until they looked almost golden. Then he said, "I'm not asking you to stay. I'm asking you to stop pretending you don't already want to." Something in me gave way then. Not a collapse, more like a door quietly unlocking. I stood up, turning away to hide the tremor in my breath. He followed close but not touching. The city noise below was distant, softened by heat and light. I could feel him behind me, his presence magnetic, the scent of cedar and coffee wrapping around me like a secret I didn't want to end. "Do you believe in love?" he asked suddenly. I closed my eyes. I used to, and now? I turned to face him. His shirt caught the breeze again, open at the throat, sunlight falling on his skin. He looked impossibly young, yet his eyes carried something steadier, older. "Now," I said, my voice trembling, "I think it's believing that terrifies me." He smiled faintly, "Then let me be the one who reminds you how." For a moment, the world seemed to still. Traffic below fading, time pausing, light holding its breath. I should have stepped back, reassembled my composure. Instead, I reached out and touched the collar of his shirt, my fingers brushing the edge of warm skin. His breath hitched, but he didn't move closer. He didn't need to. Every inch of air between us was already charged with something we both understood, but hadn't dared to name. "I don't know what this is," I whispered. "Then don't call it anything yet," he said. "Just don't hide from it." The sunlight flickered through the glass railing, scattering across us in shards of gold. I wanted to say something. Something rational, protective, final. But all that came out was a quiet laugh that sounded too much like surrender. He didn't touch me again. He didn't have to, because in that stillness, in that blinding afternoon light, every barrier I'd built began to dissolve. And I knew, whether I said it or not, I had already let him in. The following week unfolded like a dream that didn't know how to end. We didn't speak about what had happened, or hadn't. There had been no kiss, no declaration, only that unbearable stillness between us. Yet everything after felt different. The air in my apartment seemed to hold his scent, cedar, sunlight, and something faintly electric. Even my reflection had changed. There was color in my face again. But daylight, for all its beauty, has a way of revealing what we try to keep hidden. It started with whispers, neighbors noticing him on my balcony, my colleagues asking if I was seeing someone younger. The first time I heard it, I laughed it off. The second time, it didn't feel funny. By the third, it felt like a verdict. At the gallery, my assistant mentioned she'd seen me having coffee with him. Her tone was neutral, but I recognized curiosity edged with judgment. "He's just a neighbor," I said. The words tasted like denial. That evening, I saw him waiting near the elevator. His expression brightened when he saw me, but mine didn't. Not because I didn't want it to, but because fear had already started tightening its grip. "Rough day?" he asked. "Something like that," I said, brushing past him. He followed, patient as ever. "You look like you're about to disappear again." "Maybe I should," I said, and instantly regretted it. He stepped closer, voice steady. "You think hiding will make it easier?" "It will make it quieter," I whispered. He didn't argue. He just nodded slowly, as if he understood more than I wanted him to. Then, with quiet restraint, he said, "You told me once you stopped believing in permanence." "Don't let fear prove you right." I didn't answer. I couldn't. When the elevator reached my floor, I walked out without looking back. But the sound of the doors closing behind me felt too final, too loud. The next morning, I left for work early, hoping to avoid him. The city was golden, alive, indifferent. Glass towers glinting, voices echoing, 1,000 lives colliding in sunlight. Yet I felt strangely detached from it all. During a meeting, I caught sight of my reflection in the window, poised, controlled, professional, and hated how convincing it looked. By late afternoon, the exhaustion wasn't physical anymore. It was emotional, the kind that builds when you're pretending not to care. When I got home, there was a note under my door. "If you want silence, I'll give it to you, but I'll still believe you see the light." No signature. No pressure, just him. Simple, direct, patient. I stared at it for a long time before placing it beside his old sketch. The two pieces of paper seemed to hum with quiet defiance, as if waiting for me to decide what kind of woman I was going to be. The next day, I found out one of my clients had withdrawn from a deal. Apparently, someone had hinted that I was distracted lately. The gossip had reached places it didn't belong. Professional lines blurred easily in my world, and age gap rumors were a convenient weapon. I wanted to be angry, at the whispers, at him, at myself. But beneath the noise there was something purer, something that refused to be shamed. The way he made me feel alive. That afternoon, as sunlight streamed through my office window, I made a decision. I grabbed my phone and texted him, rooftop, 5 p.m. His reply came seconds later. I'll bring coffee. When I reached the terrace, he was already there, sitting on the ledge, 2 cups beside him. The city below shimmered in late afternoon gold. You look like someone who's decided something, he said. I have, I said, taking the cup. I'm tired of living like everything I want is a mistake. He smiled faintly, eyes steady. That sounds like a beginning. Or an ending, I said. He studied me quietly, then nodded. Maybe both. The wind lifted strands of my hair, brushing them against his cheek as he turned toward me. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was full, like the pause before music. I don't want to ruin your life, I said finally. You couldn't, he replied. You're the only part that makes it make sense. I looked away, eyes tracing the skyline. You're young. You don't understand what this costs. He stepped closer, voice quiet but certain. Maybe I understand exactly what it's worth. That was the moment I stopped trying to measure it. Not because it made sense, but because it didn't need to. Over the next few weeks, we stopped hiding. We didn't make announcements or explanations. We just existed in the open. Morning coffees on the terrace, walks through crowded sunlit streets, shared glances that felt like defiance and peace all at once. Some people stared, others whispered, but something about their disapproval only made us gentler with each other. Quieter, more deliberate, as if tenderness itself was our rebellion. One afternoon, I invited him to the gallery before opening hours. The space was flooded with light, the air warm and still. My newest installation, glass prisms arranged in curved lines, cast rainbows across the floor. This piece, I said, gesturing to it, was supposed to be about reflection. But now it feels more like truth, he smiled. It looks like freedom. Maybe it is. He walked closer, sunlight spilling across his black shirt, collar open, every line of him softened by brightness. When he reached me, he didn't touch, just looked. You still think you don't believe in love? I met his eyes. No, I think I believe in the kind that doesn't ask for permission. He exhaled slowly, like that was the only answer he'd been waiting for. Then he said, Good, because that's the only kind I have to give. Of course, life didn't stop testing us. My ex-husband called one evening, furious after hearing rumors. Friends questioned my judgment. One even asked if I was trying to feel young again. But the truth was simpler. I wasn't trying to feel young. I was trying to feel real, and he was the first person who made that possible. One weekend, we took a drive to the edge of the city. Nothing planned, just sunlight and open roads. The car filled with the scent of his cologne and my perfume, blending into something familiar. At a quiet overlook, we stepped out, the skyline glittering below. Do you ever wonder how long this will last? I asked. He smiled. Everything ends, but not everything fades. I looked at him, his shirt, the undone button, the calm in his eyes, and realized he wasn't afraid of endings. He was teaching me not to be either. A few weeks later, my gallery launched a new exhibition titled Belief. When the press asked about the theme, I said, It's about rediscovering light after forgetting it existed. He was there, of course, leaning casually against a column, sunlight pouring over him. When our eyes met, The noise of the crowd dimmed. After the speeches, he approached, holding a single sunflower wrapped in paper. "Still believing?" he asked softly. I smiled. "More than ever." He brushed his thumb over my wrist, not hidden, not ashamed. Cameras flashed somewhere nearby, but for once, I didn't care. Later, when the crowd was gone and the gallery was quiet, I stood by the windows. The city outside glowed, not harsh but warm, forgiving. He joined me, slipping his hand into mine. "Do you regret any of it?" he asked. I turned toward him. "No," I said. "Regret belongs to the people who never take the risk." He nodded, then pressed a small folded paper into my palm. It was another sketch, me, standing before the prisms, surrounded by scattered light. At the bottom, one line, "You stopped running. The lump in my throat surprised me." "You never stop drawing, do you?" "Not when the world finally gives me something worth remembering," he said. We stood there in silence, sunlight reflecting off the glass, soft warmth on our faces. I could hear the hum of the city, the distant laughter of strangers, the steady rhythm of his breathing beside me. For the first time in years, I wasn't performing control. I wasn't protecting myself. I was simply here. And as he leaned his forehead against mine, I realized this was what believing felt like. Not a promise, not forever, but a quiet certainty that light always finds its way back. Final paragraph. Closure now. Sometimes when I wake early, I see him on his balcony, sketching, coffee beside him, the sunlight soft on his face. He always looks up and I always wave. The world hasn't stopped judging, but I've stopped listening. Love didn't come to rescue me. It came to remind me that I was never broken to begin with. And in this city of glass and daylight, I finally understand. Believing in love isn't about trusting someone else. It's about trusting the version of yourself that's brave enough to step into the light again. Here's a cinematic style call to action, CTA, that matches the tone and emotional depth of your story. Gentle, confessional, and engaging for Wattpad or serialized platforms. If this story touched something in you, leave a comment. Tell me your thoughts, your favorite moment, or if you've ever been afraid to believe in love again. Subscribe for more daylight love stories, modern, raw, and magnetic, where every confession begins in sunlight